Well, hello and good evening. Welcome to our live development stream for July 2021. Welcome from sunny Stuttgart. And in case you're wondering, we have not been hit by the storm. That's a bit further north. So, today we'll be talking about the Spline Morph plugin. And there is no code to show yet. That's something I'll start on working tomorrow, but I'll give you a general idea of how this works, or how it's supposed to work, and also um, look at some other plugins to see what the user interface is essentially going to look like. So the basic idea is that currently morphs in Lightwave are completely linear. That means if you have a morph map and you're morphing that from 0 to 100%, then the individual vertices of the item are going to move from the base position to the morph target position in a straight line. And in many cases, that's something you might not want. One example would be if you want to use a morph map to control lids that bend over eyeballs. That won't be possible with a straight and linear morph. So let's take a look at this cube, and I think I just added a proper morph map to it. Let me just check. No, that's the old morphing. Of course, I want the morph mixer. There we go. It says there's 3 endomorphs, and that is correct. I'm just not sure if I created them the right way. But yeah, this 90 is actually 180 degrees. And as you can see, if I change this from 0 to 100, then it's not going to rotate, even though I use the rotation to create that from one position to the other. But the vertices are going to move in a straight line. So let's just add a keyframe here, and that's just so I can open the graph editor and give you an idea of what's happening. Let's take this axis only. Let's move this to frame 120 and give it a value of 1. So if we assume that this is a morph where the keyframe on the left here is the base position of a vertex, and this is the position in the morph map where you want it to go, then if you're using something like TCB splines to interpolate between both of them, you actually have a chance to influence how the transition from one point to another goes. Obviously, you have to imagine this curve to be 3-dimensional, but this should give you the idea. And you have all the TCB settings that you have here will be available for the individual morph maps. So you will have the base morph where you can set your TCB values. You will have your first morph and whatever, and you'll be able to create a whole list of morphs that you can go through. So let me just add another key. Let me just put this over here. Frame 60. Let's say let's make that 2 meters. There we go. Now, if we imagine that we actually have 2 morph maps, then you will be able to get a curve that goes through the first morph map and then ends up at the second one. And that is basically the whole idea of the spline morph. So for every individual vertex, it will take, in this case, the base position, the position of the first morph map, position on the second morph map, and then interpolate through them using this style of spline. And for each one of the morph maps, which in this case is the keyframes, you will be able to set the tension, continuity, and bias. So yeah, that is going to be the general idea. It will be available as a deformer right here, just like the morph mixer. One big difference to the morph mixer is the morph mixer allows you to essentially set weights for multiple morphs that you can select here, and you can group them and things like that. For the spline morph, you won't be able to select the weights individually. Instead, you will have one progress percentage that you can obviously animate from 0 to 100%, and that will be the progress along a chain of morphs. Now, the reason why we need this chain of morphs or morph maps is because the order of the morph maps and the values of the vertices within the morph maps define the shape of the spline curve. So I can't weigh them individually. Instead, the morph maps will be used to define a spline. And in my stupid example with the cube in the background, which actually doesn't have the right morph maps at the moment because I didn't rotate enough or rotated too much, you will be able to, let's say, create a morph map for 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270 degrees. And then as you change the progress slider from 0 to 100%, it is going to rotate the cube in a fairly circular fashion. The vertices are going to move in a fairly circular fashion, probably not a perfect circle, but close enough. It's going to be a circle as approximated by spline curves. You might be able to get there if you tweak the tension and continuity a little bit, or maybe just even the tension. And yeah, so that is the general idea. The user interface is going to use something that I have created before, or at least we'll be using the same idea. If we go to 2D textures, we have the multi-image sampler. And it's down here. Let me just load a few images. Doesn't really matter which ones, but I'll just load those. There we go. All right. And if we just ignore the preview on the top, you will get a list like this with the individual morph maps. You'll be able to add them, duplicate them, reorder them, remove them, and so on. And in addition to that, you will get the TCB settings, which will be again per morph map. So if you reorder the morph map, then the respective TCB settings are going to be reordered as well. And at the top, there's going to be a percentage value that you can animate. I'll probably make the TCB settings for the individual morph maps animatable as well, even though I suspect it's not going to be that useful, but it doesn't really cost anything. And there will also be an option to turn the whole thing into a closed spline. So if we assume that those images here, for the sake of this hypothetical, that they're morph maps, if you don't have a closed spline, then as you progress from 0 to 100% on the progress value, you will first have the vertices use the first morph map, which is usually the base morph or the something with no morphs attached to it, which will be a special entry here. Then the second morph map, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, and the vertices will move along the spline defined by those morph maps. And 100% will essentially be the value of the last morph map. If you enable the closed option or closed spline option, not sure how it's going to be called, then it's going to loop. So in that case, you start here at 0%, and then it will progress to the first, the second, the third, and the fifth morph map. But 100% is not going to be this one, but 100% is going to be this one interpolating back to the base morph map. So that's essentially just like a closed spline that defines a circle. And yeah, the whole thing, the whole deformations are going to be multi-threaded. The first part of the code that I'm going to write is the list panel, like this one, that manages everything, because that's kind of the hardest thing. And once that is done, I'm going to work on the actual algorithm, which is relatively simple, and I'll just need to make sure that it performs quickly enough. But that really shouldn't be a problem. Also, one thing I'm considering is to give the option of a weight map that delays the progress percentage. So the idea of that is, and that's really hard to simulate here, but it's a bit kind of like the inertia plugin, but then again, not quite like it. So let's assume I've got this cube here, and I have, let's say, a 0% weight on the right-hand side and a 100% weight on the left-hand side. And if I animate the percentage slider on the spline morph, then first the right-hand side is going to move and follow along the curve as defined by the morph maps. And then with a delay, and that delay can be set in the user interface, the right-hand side, the one with the weight map set to 100%, is going to follow along and do its thing using the morph maps. So that gives you the option to mix the idea of spline-based morphs with a kind of time delay per vertex. And since the delay can be animated as well, you could do things like have all vertices start at the same time, but then increase the delay, which means that some of them are still going to start lagging, and then in the end just decrease the delay again, and they all move together across the morph maps. And that might even be useful for non-spline morph maps, which also means that one of the options I should add to the spline morph is the option to change from a TCP spline to a linear interpolation for that current morph. And if it's an open spline, also give some options on what should happen if we are beyond the 0 to 100% range for the progress along the spline. So yeah, plenty of talking, not much showing. Sorry for that. Hope you could kind of follow me. If you have any questions, yeah, I'm waiting because I'm running out of things to say. And I have to admit, I was being super stupid picking a cube here, because if you rotate it by 90 degrees, you don't really see that in Modeler, because it just looks the same. So I wasn't sure if I actually rotated the morph maps by 90 or 180 or whatever it was. I'll probably have to redo that. So yeah, yeah, that's pretty much I have. Yes, please, one question. Or at least give me an okay if you understood what I was talking about. Some feedback, please. And yeah, I suppose that the biggest difference between this and the traditional morph mixer is that it's not mixing, it's actually creating a whole trajectory essentially for every vertex of the mesh through various morph maps. Well, it's about I think 23, 24 degrees Celsius and sunny, even though the sun is setting right now. And the next pub quiz is on the 7th of August, I think. Yes, Steph and I have been taking part in an online YouTube pub quiz, which happens every couple of weeks, being streamed from the Netherlands. So yeah, not much else to talk about. Oh yeah, schedule, of course. So the idea is I want to get the user interface done tomorrow, which basically means, develop the list, the ability to add morph maps to the list, and so on. And once that is done, it's basically just about evaluating everything. Um, so let me just have a look at the calendar because we are on the 16th already. So yeah, I suppose we're going to have the usual Q&A stream at the 30th, which is Friday in a fortnight. And I think I should get everything done by 25th, 26th. That's when you will get your first preview copy of the plugin. So I can concentrate on the user interface tomorrow, and then the weekend after I'll be working on the algorithms and testing everything and doing the spline interpolation. I've got all the code for that. I've got the code for the list as well. It just needs to be basically assembled from different bits and pieces. So yeah, you should get your hands on this by the 26th or so. And as always, I will be posting screenshots on Discord, especially as I work on the user interface, just to get some early feedback from you guys to see if it makes sense, if something should be rearranged or relabeled, or if it's not clear which control does in which context. And so any of you that aren't on Discord, you should be. That's where the magic happens. But yeah, that's kind of the plan. 26th sounds good to me. And yeah, we did have our heat wave already. Not sure what the weather's going to be next couple of weeks. So yeah, that's all there is. Just a boring cube to look at and a voice to listen to. So if there aren't any more questions on this, I suppose we can call it a night. I'll talk a bit longer just in case somebody does have questions. If not, thank you for joining us here. To all our patrons, thank you very much for joining us. And yes, if you aren't a patron, there's a link in the description below. And not only will you get this plugin when it's done, but I think it's about 30 or 40 other plugins that we have developed in the past more than 2.5 years. For all the patrons, you get those as well. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening to me rambling on. And thanks to your support. Have a nice weekend. Have a nice evening. And for the patrons, we'll talk again in 2 weeks when you should have had your hands on the first release of this. And when you hopefully have some questions on the use or feature requests, whatever. So thanks for joining us and have a good evening. Bye bye.